Okay, let's start. So this is, it's great to be here. We are going to discuss account abstraction and its use cases on Ethereum. So before we start, we are joined by Lukas from Safe, Ansgar from Ethereum Foundation, Sachin from Bioeconomy, Kirill from Block Scout, and Louis from Gelato, and Pedro from Wallet Connect. So before we start, if you can just introduce yourself and let us know what you're working on, that would be great.
All right, let me start. So yeah, I'm Luis. I'm the founder of Gelato Network. We did a bunch of stuff. We have been around for 5 years. Actually, I shared a co-working space with Lukas, and I think you were there as well in Full Node in Berlin back in the day, 5 years ago. Full Node, shout out. And yeah, so I mean, obviously Gelato has been originally working on smart contract automation, which has its application inside account abstraction as well. So we're quite excited about account abstraction and automation. We also built our Relays API system 3 years ago for gasless transactions. Like back then it was all about meta transactions, not so much about smart accounts yet. Yeah, we also dabbled a bit with 437, just making our relay infrastructure compatible with that. We had a project with Safe, working with their account abstraction SDK at some point. More recently, we sort of withdrew ourselves a bit from the active development inside 437 and focus more on our rollup as a service product, where we want to work with anyone who's building 437 enabled accounts or others to basically distribute them to developers. Yeah, I have my takes on 437 and whatnot, but yes, not super actively working on it at this stage.
Hi, my name is Kirill. I'm an engineer and the head of protocols research at Block Scout. So recently we have completed the integration of the ERC4337 at Block Scout. We added the full support for indexing of the account abstraction and user operations, for the cold data decoding and so on. Super excited to support all of the upcoming EIPs, rollup improvement proposals, and to discuss the UX implications of those.
Hi, my name is Pedro, founder of Wallet Connects. If you don't know Wallet Connect, it connects your wallets, as it says on the name. But most importantly, it's an interoperability layer between dApps and wallets, so it affects a lot of the user experience that we face today because there's a lot of fragmentation and a lot of wallets. And now wallets are getting more complex. So now not only you have like external accounts, but you also have smart accounts. And kind of fixing those problems is something that we focus a lot, and improving the experience to have less clicks, because with all of these operations and batching, everything is getting a little bit more complex, and we want the users to be completely abstracted from that.
Hi everyone, this is Sachin. I'm from Bioeconomy, CTO and co-founder. And Bioeconomy is actually focusing on improving the user experience on all the blockchains. So we've been here since 2019, and our main focus is purely to improve the user experiences. And we have infrastructure built for that. Our clients are actually application developers and wallets. So they use our infra. We provide gas abstraction, execution abstraction. So all the things that you need to do in terms of transaction management and gas management, you don't have to do that. We abstract all of these at the infra layer. And we started with gasless transactions in 2019, and then we try to solve the problem for cross-chain bridges. And now we are currently focusing fully on account abstraction. So we have a full stack solution for account abstraction, especially 437. We have smart accounts, we have bundlers, we have paymaster solutions for anyone to use that. It's a plug-and-play SDK. So that's where we are currently focusing on. I think 3074 kind of slows the efforts on for achieving the full account abstraction. But maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, our main focus is purely on improving the user experience. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ansgar. I am a researcher at the Ethereum Foundation now. Actually, most of my account abstraction work used to be in a team before that called Quilt. We were at Consensus, and summer 2020 to summer 2021, we basically for like a year, we focused on account abstraction. We created 2 EIPs. One of them was basically the spiritual kind of predecessor of 4337. That was basically an enshrined version. That was the EIP 2938, which then, because of 1559 and the upcoming merge, basically there was no room to do that on mainnet. So then people instead went ahead with basically this out-of-protocol version of 4337. And then kind of as a side product, kind of like just like a random accident there, we also kind of stumbled upon the idea of like 3074. Back then we basically thought that account abstraction just still needed some time to grow, and so we thought it was like a good kind of transitionary EIP to just make EUAs have more functionality while we wait for account abstraction to arrive. I'm in this weird position now where now 3 years later, I'm not so sure that it's still the right time for 3074, just because now account abstraction is so much more mature. I still think if we get this right, it might still basically help with getting a lot of traction around like just getting kind of standardized DApp support for all these more advanced account features. But I think as we just heard in the previous talk, right, I think there now also is a lot of downside risk of like, if we don't get this right, we end up with like 2 separate tech stacks here. So I don't know, I'm basically just now entering the account abstraction space again to help kind of guide this a little bit.
To close the round, I'm Lukas from Safe. We have one goal only, to make every account a smart account, because it will make the ecosystem much more secure. I used to say more convenient than secure. Convenient part, maybe we will have 3074 solved, but it will definitely make the ecosystem more secure, and we do a bunch of things like open source developer tooling, infrastructure, interfaces and ecosystem initiatives to support that. But what really we want to do is to accelerate this transition to smart accounts.
Thank you all. So my starting question would be that 4337 is just the first step in the long journey of account abstraction. So Ansgar, I'd like to start with you in knowing when the eventual roadmap of AA on Ethereum finishes, what it's going to look like to transact on Ethereum, what's the UX going to be, and what are we exactly abstracting away at the protocol layer?
Audio is a little bad, but I'll try to answer from what I heard. So yeah, kind of I think that the roadmap for account abstraction on Ethereum is a little messy right now, right? Because we have these kind of two separate paths now with kind of 4337, which is the proper way to do full account abstraction, but it also is basically requires more of an active kind of effort for opt-in support for dApps and everything. So it's still in a more kind of immature stage. And now we have 3074, which basically promises to make existing accounts smarter, but it doesn't deliver full account abstraction. I think like Lukas did an amazing job to just kind of tease out the differences. So I think basically in the optimistic case here, basically 3074 becomes a stepping stone that accelerates general adoption of more advanced smart features that then lead to the end goal of us moving away from UAs. But basically, in a way, it ups the stakes, because now if we don't get it right, we end up with this kind of messed up transition that has us stranded in this local maximum of basically smarter EOAs, but not full account abstraction.
All right. So is it correct to say that, like in far future, users will just like the dependence on ECDC signatures or any kind of signatures is abstracted away at the protocol level. So users are free to choose what kind of signature schemes they want and what kind of like multisigs or any kind of validation mechanism they want. So at the protocol layer, is that the abstraction layer that we're talking about, that authentication mechanism for transactions? So what I mean to say is, ultimately, when at the protocol layer, account abstraction is fully adopted. So what is exactly abstracted away when we say account abstraction, right? Because right now, everything is done at the application layer. But when it's ultimately adopted by the protocol, what it's going to look like then at the protocol layer itself?
So on the protocol layer itself,
I think it's basically about EIP 5003, maybe. No, the RIP, I guess, would be what's the RIP 7.5?
Right. I mean, we basically we just need to find a way to migrate existing users, right? But then in terms of like, support for the protocol itself. So one thing that I feel like, because everyone uses the term account abstraction slightly differently, right? And so for example, one thing that to me is a very crucial part of account abstraction, and that specifically you don't get with 3074, is a fully decentralized mempool. And why is that such a concern for the base protocol? Because we care about censorship resistance, and we have all these mechanisms in the work of like inclusion lists and everything, and for that we need basically like a decentralized kind of base mempool. And actually making basically like getting account abstraction right is not obvious on the protocol level, because you need arbitrary validity conditions that still can basically be processed in a mempool that's not open to DOS attacks, and that's a really hard challenge. That's what kind of 4337 was all about solving. And that's what 3074 in itself does not solve. So basically, we need to find some way on the base protocol that's not at all about like how does this look like for dApps or anything. That's just the base protocol layer, right? We need to find a way to basically to enable such a permissionless mempool, so we can have all these kind of features that we need for censorship resistance. And basically, that looks something like 4337. So we need to find some sort of path in that direction.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate goal is actually to enable full account abstraction at the protocol level, and there are efforts around that, like RIP 7560 is actually built on 4337 to enable the same kind of account abstraction at the protocol level, and right now 3074 is coming that empowers EOAs, but we don't again want to end up in a situation where we have to manage like two different standards of account abstraction. And I guess wallets needs to redesign the way application actually interacts with the wallets today. And so far, all the wallets that have been designed were designed keeping the EOA in mind, EOA interaction. And now, smart accounts are coming. Ultimate end goal is, full account abstraction where every account is actually smart account. So I think there is a need to redesign that interaction between dApps and wallets so that it works with both standards. So tomorrow when native account abstraction comes, dApps again don't find themselves need to change again the way their users use their application.
I kind of don't like how we're always comparing 3074 to 4337, because we're always forgetting about the fact that 4337 has the requirement of deploying a smart account, a smart contract account. And 3074 kind of allows us to leverage all of the infrastructure that 4337 has created for EOAs as well. Now, can you get the full benefits? No, I understand that, because at the end of the day, account abstraction, which is a terrible term, smart accounts, which is a much better term, it consists of multiple things that we want to achieve. We want to use different types of cryptography. We want to use delegated signing. We want to have subsidized transactions, new recovery systems, and 3074 essentially just allows us to do delegated signing, essentially. And with that, we can actually subsidize transactions using the existing 4337 infrastructure, right? So I don't think it's exclusive, because we have to understand that yes, we're going to onboard 1 billion people into this world, but there's already 100, I don't know, there's a number of people in here, and these people need to use 4337 without deploying an account. So we need to have a benefit for the existing community and the future community. And taking a fully exclusive approach of 4337, we're basically saying, oh, all the nice features are for the new people. The existing people, you guys just bear with it, So 3074 kind of finds that balance, and I don't think it kind of affects the progress that we had. In fact, it allows us to test with the existing community to leverage the infrastructure that 4337 has built.
Yeah, I agree with you. But for example, with 3074, the way dApps are going to interact with wallets now, is there going to be like a new sort of API between dApps and wallets to access, 3074 signatures? And when tomorrow native account abstraction comes and all users wants to move to smart accounts, will they again need to, change those interactions? So I'm saying, like, why not make that interaction in a way that's compatible with 3074 and native account abstraction tomorrow?
I mean, but Lukas just presented, so for those who were here, you saw that 5792, which is wallet call API method, already creates that abstraction layer. It's a brand new interface for wallets to talk to dApps, which does not think about, is this a smart account or not? You know, it has completely decoupled that interaction for the dApp to have to understand, am I talking to an external account or a smart account? I think we're fixing these problems. There's multiple work streams here, you know?
And maybe just to briefly mention, because I think in a way, like, that's where 3074 has this double-edged character where it can actually be quite helpful, because the way it works is that you need these individual invokers for like individual functionality, and it could well be that these invokers end up being like good kind of crystallization points for standards for dApp to wallet interaction, right? So once you have a batching invoker, you have that defines that standard, or once you have a recovery invoker or something, basically where now we specifically kind of get the critical mass of all the UA users, so that we finally get like proper smart account feature supported by all the dApp-facing libraries. And if we get it right and it's all compatible, which is a big if, and I think we really have to make sure we get there and we don't end up with two separate tech stacks, but if we make it compatible, I think it can also have this catalyzing effect.
And don't forget that user operations for 437 are not perfect either. Like, if you read all the rules that it takes for you to do a user operation, you limit yourself to like, pretty much most smarter contracts are too complex to be embedded into a user operation. So with these invokers, we might be able to actually solve that problem. There's like two approaches to this. We either all deploy smarter contracts and we use modular smart contracts with like 75, 79, and now we have a module system that will abstract all of these user operations, but then the EOAs can't use these because user operations are so limited to protect the bundlers.
But okay, sorry, I don't want to keep, but like, just to briefly respond to this, because I think this is really, really crucial, because you made this distinction between convenience and security, right? And like, this is a great example, because yes, it's more convenient to have more features. The reason why 437 is so restrictive in that sense is specifically to allow for decentralized mempools, which is, it's a huge challenge, right? Like, usually what all these kind of sponsored transactions, gas station networks, all these kind of Fedoseev used to do is just trusted relayer networks, where basically, hey, if I'm Gnosis, I just run the relayer for you, I know my account, so I can just have special logic to support it. And that works fine until the relayer goes offline, right? And so if we end up in a world where, yes, the convenience is great, but then I just trust that my, I don't know, MetaMask relayer is always online, and if it's offline, I don't have a fallback because I fundamentally can't have a decentralized mempool for these type of operations, then basically it's all fine until it isn't, right? And it's a very brittle architecture that we would be building.
Actually, to riff on that point, part of the reason that I lost a bit of interest on 437 was because I agree with you that I understood it originally to the main goal to be to have a permissionless mempool mimicking the original public mempool that, I mean, nowadays we don't even use that often because of sandwiching and whatnot, right? But that was like the idea, and in practice, I think a lot of the companies that were building in the space were actually still privatizing all of the user operations. So I guess Alchemy, probably by Economy as well. I don't know. Even we at Gelato, when we dabbled with it, like the bundlers privatized the order flow. The users would still submit their user operations to a private endpoint. That's how the business is being handled. So this mempool there's really no incentive to share this flow. There's no incentive for Alchemy to share this user operation. So I think it's sort of a broken mechanism, to be honest, where 437 is still cool because if we standardize, the vendor lock-in isn't so strong. If you want to switch from Alchemy to Biconomy or whatnot, you can do that more easily. You don't have to update a bunch of code and so on. It's sort of more easily done, but like the actual feature of this sort of ephemeral mempool out there, that I don't really see it in practice. Maybe that's the case nowadays, but when I was looking at it, like, I don't know, half a year or a year ago, the space was not really going there.
Okay. Promise, last comment. But like, I think the problem with these things is just, like with something like censorship resistance, right? Censorship resistance works great if it's preemptive, where basically you know that trying to censor will not work because there's always a way to basically fall back and have some forced inclusion mechanism. If you can't have a forced inclusion mechanism, basically now it means that, yes, sure, maybe there's like 5 different big kind of relay companies that all are happy to relay my 3074 transaction, But basically now if I want to just censor, it's very easy for me to go to all these 5 companies and I'm like, hey, please, you're not allowed to relay these specific type of transactions. And then because only like 0.1% of users are affected, those users are just out of luck and have no way of actually getting their transactions onto the chain anymore, right? So like we are just on a default path now where basically we end up in the situation where most users have a great and very convenient experience, and a few users are basically completely out of luck. If we, again, this is not a necessary consequence of 3074, but if we don't get this right.
Okay. My next question is to Kirill. So with 4037, 3074, intents are also coming up. So I just want to know how are block explorers going to involve with all of this? Because right now, the user perspective is that I pay for gas and I swap or bridge or transfer an ERC20. But now, soon enough, the perspective might change from that I have 20 USDC on Optimism and I want to pay someone in ETH on Arbitrum. So do you see explorers evolving with all this to show all the details?
Yeah, I think one of the big problems with this end game for account abstraction, full account abstraction, is that it also brings this increased complexity in the UX, in the dev UX. So we don't have the standardized way how the wallets interact with this account abstraction, how they batch operation, where this operation are mempooled, and so on. And then from the UX, there's also increased the complexity of how this operation can be indexed, how they can be parsed, how they can be decoded, because if you take a look at this just in a single example of the transaction sent to the ERC for 337 entry point, which contains like multiple transactions in multiple batches, it's very hard to reason about just from the current level of development in the block explorers and other infrastructure. So we definitely will need to spend much more effort into decoding these batches, into developing new ways to display these meta transactions and user operations, and actually bringing them back to the way how the simple transactions were displayed to the users before, so that we can decode simple actions the users perform in these user operations. We can interpret them using AI or similar tools. And so for that, we'll have to standardize certain interfaces on the smart contract wallets. So like for now, just an example, basically every smart contract wallet uses a different signature for the execute method, which makes it harder for us as a block explorer or similar infrastructure projects to decode these methods and to actually understand what contract is being called and how to reason about this internal call data. So yeah, we'll definitely have to put a lot more effort to improve this UX in the DevX to actually make account abstraction more usable and as friendly as the current simple operations users send through EOAs. Yeah.
Thanks. My next question is about the introduction of a new mempool in 4337. So we have already seen in the usual block production that there are some entities like relays who, on which there is some trust relied on from validators. With 4337, there are new resource requirements as well that are introduced. But a North Star of Ethereum has been to keep the resource usage low so that an average person can participate in running the blockchain. So do you see some centralization happening on 4337 mempool as well? And are there any concerns about how to mitigate that or something like that? So with the mempool, 437 mempool, like we have seen in the usual mempool that there are some centralized relays where the trust is placed upon by the validators, right? And do you see similar concerns happening with the 4337 mempool? Because I see similar patterns emerging in that mempool as well. So do you see a similar pattern emerging there as well? And are there any concerns on how to mitigate the emergence of centralized player in this whole ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there is some active work going on in decentralizing the 437 mempool. And I think everyone knows that there is a centralization risk with the way current bundlers are operating, and this has been thought of before, and that's why there is already a roadmap first to decentralize that bundlers, so that there is a shared and decentralized user of mempool, and then from there we can easily go to 7560, where these bundlers don't have to be run by some external, actors. The validators itself can, run this bundling logic in the validator node, and that's where we all want to reach. That's the native, account abstraction.
Yeah, I would also say, I don't think centralization in itself is something negative or something we have to avoid. It's really more about centralization is okay as long as there's always an easy fallback. And to me, that's what I'm mostly focused on. Like, we have to make sure that it's very easy to, like, if those centralized parties go away, or for some reason they do a bad job, or they do something we don't like, that there's always an alternative. And so making sure that those alternatives are built and are usable actually in practice, I think that's an important thing. And then, yes, we will see over time more and more specialization, more and more like specialized mempools, private order flow, all this kind of thing. I think that's inevitable, but it's always important to have this decentralized fallback.
Couldn't users run their own relayer in case they're censored by others?
Well, yes, but then you need an EOA again. Like, then we are back to square one. Like, yes, but then you don't have account abstraction.
But it is a fallback. It's like, I mean, there's also fallbacks that are not that nice when, like, the sequencer on L2 starts censoring you, and they're also not ideal, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
But at the end of the day, like, it's something that the Ethereum blockchain itself should have done in the first place. Like, there's so many nodes in the Ethereum network, like, not leveraging those nodes to actually become bundlers, that's something that we should be really accelerating. I understand there's, like, skepticism from, like, core developers to, like, go full-on native account abstraction, but the benefits completely outweigh the risks, in my opinion.
One point I want to make earlier is, for me, the major concern around 3074 is that it both feels too late and too early at the same time. Like, too late because it would have been a viable kind of stepping path towards full account abstraction if we wouldn't go the 457 route. But now that we went the 457 route, we didn't wait long enough that we actually started having the learnings that we could then have to form around 3074, because like it's similar challenges there around like cross-chain. Like, you might not have the same invokers on different networks. It's the same, like, you don't have like a smart account plugin at the same address on different networks. It's about the security, permissioning system. It's about the standardization of the modularity in a way that, like, we just like really like a half a year ago, we started having like an ecosystem, and we started having learnings from more and more users, and now we have unleashed the same problems that we have with smart accounts to EOA users without actually having any answers to these learnings yet. Like, we're working on all of them, but we don't have the solutions yet, and that, yeah, I see risky.
It's funny you say that, but the reason 3074 even got included in the first place and got all of this momentum was because of 4237. Because I remember 3074 at the beginning, I was so excited about it, and everyone just thought, oh, this is too many security risks, and it didn't even have a nonce at the time. People just complained, and then 4237 showed up, everyone was super excited about, and then what created was now a polarization, because some people were really happy about 4237, and some people just thought it was over-engineered, and that all of a sudden people started liking 3074 for its simplicity. So it was a little bit of a cycle there. Because I remember you were saying, like, oh no, all of these memes about 3074, but those memes started because 4237 was too complex, so. But at the end of the day, they're like complementary. I don't see a problem. I just see like progress. Like in 2019, we were talking about meta transactions, and it was like the best thing that we got was like gas station network, and it was still like really centralized.
My next question is about fragmentation on EVM across different rollups and chain. With push 0 opcode, the mainnet adopted first, and then it came out slowly on other L2s, and some L2s have not even adopted push 0 until now. 3074 introduces 2 new more opcodes, and again it will be rolled out on mainnet first and probably will come on some L2s later. And so do you see this as a feature or a bug? So with different EVM versions on all of these chains and wallets supporting all of them, how do you see this fragmentation playing out?
I mean, one thing that I'm starting to like that's happening is because we're basically modularizing everything really fast, and everything is just being so fragmented, but at the same time it's allowing us to kind of redefine what a blockchain is. So if we do have like these bundlers, or sometimes people like to call it like searchers, become almost the cross-chain layer for all the blockchains, users can like sign operations for multiple chains and just like bundle them together, and they can evaluate if this is gonna succeed on a multi-chain level, and then just settle them all at the same time. Because the biggest problem with like all of the cross-chain communication is that one transaction had to settle on chain A, then on chain B. So if we actually like just take all of the settlement away from the blockchains themselves and then just resolve all of the operations off-chain, then we can actually know that once we settle them, we have guarantees that given the mempool that we have, these chains on and these operations on different chains will all resolve at the same time. So I think we're actually going to have this full chain abstraction as a consequence of account abstraction.
And I think this is my last question as we are almost out of time. Ansgar, you recently expressed your disagreement with 3074 rolling out here, and then this is one of the common concerns with this. And people are raising concerns about nonce in this, but this EIP has been discussed over several years. So if you can give us insights on how to, if any interested people can, how can they get involved in discussing EIPs and what goes behind the scenes in creating an EIP, taking it through all the way to mainnet. So just some behind the scenes action on that.
So basically, like kind of just talking about how to get involved with
yeah,
the
because there
process.
was a famous tweet floating around that don't get involved in EIP discussions.
Right.
But
I mean, which is actually interesting because the talk I gave 2 years ago about 3074 specifically, I think was like 3074 and the governance process of Ethereum or something. So like I think if people want to go back and watch it, it was also about like how did it kind of how does this process work? I think in general, I mean it's easy to get involved, right? Like a lot of these conversations happen, like especially for like the EIP process. There's every time you can open EIP, like eips.ethereum.org. It always links to a discussion forum, a thread. So you can go in there, you can read the messages, you can comment, you can participate. So that's a good way to get involved. Of course, the hurdle to actually like get involved in a way of like creating your own EIPs and actually push for changes in the EVM, that's a bit of a higher hurdle, because what sometimes we see is people who like have an idea and then they put in basically the minimum effort to like come up with some spec, and then they put it out there and they're like, hey, can you have a look and just see if it's a good idea or bad idea? Like usually what you need to do there is like to actually really put in the effort of like really kind of talking to people, getting feedback, figuring out like how would that interact with all the different pieces of the ecosystem. So basically creating EIPs and like going through the entire process is a very kind of like involved multi-step process. I will say that it's interesting. We are in an interesting moment in time right now where basically we talked about like EVM equivalence just now, right? And like how basically this interacts with different chains and everything. And in the past, we saw a lot of layer 2s that basically just copied what layer 1 did with EVM equivalence. We are starting to move a little bit away from that. So now like you talked about the IP 7000 something, like the enshrined account abstraction, IP rollup improvement proposal. So we created a separate standards process now for rollup changes. And so I think we are starting to see a lot of like active participation in the governance process from the layer 2 side as well now. And so like maybe if you have interesting ideas, that might actually be an interesting starting point to like go talk to layer 2s, understand their specific needs, and maybe instead of creating an EIP, maybe create an IIP and like kind of get involved that way. I think that's like a very timely moment, like thing to do.
Yeah, any last comments? We are nearing the end of the panel. Yeah, I think this is it.
Well, thank you all for this very interesting exchange. Maybe we have a couple of minutes to take a few questions. If anyone has a question, raise your hand. Yep.
Just as a heads up, the audio's pretty bad up here when getting questions, so please make sure to speak up loudly.
Question is, why do we need to enshrine account abstraction at the base layer? Why don't we rely on the rollups to implement it in their opinionated way? So like ZK Sync already has account abstraction, and they may choose to do it differently. Why do we implement a very specific design of account abstraction at the Ethereum mainnet? Why don't we just delegate it all to the rollups?
I think one of the reasons is actually to save gas cost, because once you implement these protocols at the base layer and at the protocol layer, for example, in RIP 7560, these entry points and some other contracts are supposed to be pre-compiles, so it does not take that much gas as compared to if you just deployed them as a smart contracts. So that's like one of the reasons why native account abstraction makes more sense, because these days applications do complain about smart account deployment costs, and even one 437 transaction, why it's costlier than native like EOA transaction. Can we bring that cost down to comparable to at least EOA transactions? So that's why that's one of the reasons, and of course decentralization is another one, removing the central point of failure in any protocol. I know there is decentralized bundler network coming soon, but that may work, that may not work. We don't know. But yeah, enshrining at the protocol level definitely will save you some gas, and you can actually be in a world where you can compare EOA and smart account transactions.
I mean, at the end of the day, you also have to kind of count the cost benefit, right? Like, account abstraction is not supposed to be used by a minority of people. If it's meant to be used by 99%, hopefully, of the users, then why build this whole off-chain infrastructure when you already have this whole network of nodes? You're not leveraging the network effects of the Ethereum network, and you're just recreating it all from scratch on the top. I understand that some features are maybe exclusive to let's say 50% of users, but account abstraction is supposed to be for everyone. In fact, I don't want to use hardware wallets. I don't want to use keys and seed phrases. I want to move away from that. I want the account to just exist, to just be universally as a concept. And I think we all want that. We all want that kind of level of convenience and security.
I think a very important aspect of having it enshrined at the base layer is also just to sort of force standardization, to make people agree on a standard, even though they will bicker about it. And certainly we have to be careful not to enshrine the wrong standard, but that's always an open conversation, But yeah, I think that's maybe the most important aspect here, because I think, for example, with Safe, we've built our own account abstraction kit before, which was non-standardized, right? We had our own thing, and it's a bit like you're developing in a silo, and yeah. So if you are actually sort of enforcing a standard, which at some point someone has to do, then you have less risks when you start building a business on it, because it's standardized, right? You don't have to worry so much about it being deprecated or so at some point, and or the company that supports that special implementation going out of business. So yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah, and I think that's probably also still one of the biggest hurdles to adoption here, is even now we see that 437 tried to become a standard. It had a lot of backing and so on. I mean, it's probably still on a good way there, but we see that it's not fully agreed upon yet. There's other proposals sort of entering the room, entering the chat. So yeah, but yeah, at this point it seems like 437 is still going to be the standard, I guess. But yeah, I think that's one of the main benefits of having it at the base layer. Yeah.
So I recognize account abstraction is bigger than just increasing or adding to the ways that we're able to protect our accounts than forcing people to remember a seed phrase. But I guess my question is, do we feel like we're overestimating the Web 2 experience? So in the sense, it seems like account abstraction is to give us parity with a Web 2 UX, right? Where we're able to offload and delegate these responsibilities to some kind of, let's say, centralized force or entity. But I still have to have a separate password if I don't want to be super unsecure and risk all my accounts being hacked if one of them is compromised, for Facebook, for Google, for Amazon, et cetera, all the different services that I use. And then I'm likely using some kind of like password repository like LastPass, like 1Password, where I have a master password, where if that gets compromised, then all of my stuff is SOL, right, anyway. So I'm wondering, like, what are your feelings towards like, or what are your feelings on like what the ultimate goal is for account abstraction anyway? Like, is it for Web 2 parity, which already seems a bit insecure? Like, I think we're all worried about that. We're worried about the security we get with Web 2 anyway. And like, yeah, what are we really trying to achieve with account abstraction, in your view? With that in mind.
I mean, currently users don't even have an option, right? So I think that's the number one thing that we need to actually consider. Like, it's very well understood that like an EOA is just safer in the sense that if you are the bearer of the private key, now it's your full responsibility, no intermediary risk, nothing, not even smart contract risk, right? But now we're forcing everyone to be a bearer of a private key, right? That isn't like the best experience, and we are not even considering other use cases. In a normal scenario, people have more than one device, right? Even if you don't own a laptop, you might own a tablet, and you're now going to have to import private keys around. And even in traditional cryptography, I mean like pre-blockchain cryptography, just the concept that you don't rotate keys goes against every cryptography principle, you know? So like smart accounts are actually designing proper cryptography principles and actually allowing people to have more organic patterns into how they carry their lives. Like we're all kind of like used to now to knowing that this private key must be secure and don't share it, blah, 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 because we've been saying this story like enough to not sound crazy in our heads, but like it is crazy. Like nobody, not having recovery is not acceptable. Like,
I think we really maxed out on the amount of people that we can really onboard to EOAs. Like even now we run into challenges, people getting phished, losing their private keys. Like it's even in a smaller group relatively where we can educate people. It's more technical people, even there it causes issues. If we scale this out to billions of people, that's not going to be feasible. So smart accounts are needed to onboard like 1 billion people to Web3. And I think actually it would prevent people then defaulting to custodial solutions. That's the main thing, because like the billion people wouldn't use like these private key wallets. They would just use some like questionable MPC solution if they're lucky, and or worst case some centralized exchange, and then we're back to like platform lock-in and all this stuff.
And I think people don't often talk about security when they talk about account abstraction. That's like very critical aspect of an account. First security has to be there. Even when you onboard on existing wallets today, that the part of their onboarding process do mention that you have to safeguard these keys. They again make you retype the keys to just make sure that you have the backup. So there is focus on security even with the existing wallets today. But again, the way EOA security works, just remembering your seed phrase, and when it's lost, you just completely give the control to another person. That's not the best way of security. The best way to implement the security, and that's where smart account actually comes into play, where you don't have to depend on the existing cryptography. Let's say tomorrow, we are talking about quantum resistance. When there are systems that are actually able to, generate a private key that you own, then what you will do if you are just stuck with the EOA accounts? Smart accounts have the capability to add different, kind of authorizations mechanisms, not just EOA. Passkeys are there, and in the future, like any new authorization that might come can easily be implemented on smart accounts. So that's why it's very important to actually focus on, getting the account abstraction fully across all blockchains. That's how I see like we can actually make the future secure.
Yeah, I think it all comes down a lot to the flexibility, not just security. So you can't do much with just an EOA, but with smart contracts, we basically want to support the minimum number of EIPs and different standards. for the people to be able to reach like the highest number of different use cases and customizations, including all these recovery features, key rotation, multi-sig, and so on.
All right. Well, let's hear it for our panel for account abstraction. Pedro, Lukas, Kirill, Ansgar, Sachin, and Radul. Thank you very much. Oh, and Lukas. No, Louis.